All right. Fantastic. All right, welcome. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second day of our United Sustainability Summit. My name is Tom Kurian. I'm the program manager for UNFCU's Global Sustainability Program, the industry team, and I happen to also be the Vice President of Information Security at UNFCU. For those of you who are just joining us today, again, welcome. If you didn't, as I had mentioned a few minutes ago, if you didn't join us yesterday, a lot of great content, really great dialogue. We will have that today and yesterday's session are recorded, and we'll definitely be making that available for you guys to review and share. I think it was just a fantastic and engaging session. It is my real pleasure to reintroduce Carlos Calderon, the Chief Executive Officer of the President of the Organization of American States Federal Credit Union, UIS FCU, who is our co-host organization for this year's United Sustainability Credit Union Summit. Carlos noted yesterday and did a great wrap-up of all the things we discussed, and that we had a lot to look forward to today. And he is absolutely right. We're delighted that Carlos is back and ready to kick us off today. So Carlos, in Washington, D.C., please I turn it to you. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Tom. Thanks for the kind words. Good morning to every one of you. If this were a summit like in years past, I would be opening today with remarks about this amazing city from where I hail, from our nation's capital. But this is coronavirus's time, and most of us are working from home, right? But today, I can definitely speak about the positive impact on the environment that this crisis has brought us. I recently heard that COVID-19 has accelerated by 10 years the adoption of technologies, efficiency practices, and electronic services by institutions, consumers. I don't know if that projection is accurate, but what we all know is that it has had a profound impact in our operations, work environment, and delivery of services. The new normal is something we would have never imagined 1 year ago. But this is a great opportunity to reconsider and make the new normal one that is more in harmony with the environment, and continuing on this new trend to build on it and be more conscious of our carbon footprint. This crisis has shown all of us that yes, we can do it. Like we say in Spanish, sí se puede. All of us in this summit were brought here by the same common force. We are part of one of the largest grassroots movements on earth, the U.S. Credit Union movement. As participants and leaders in this movement, we have the implicit responsibility based on our 7 cooperative principles of trying to make this world a better place. Because of this responsibility, it is important that the leaders of our movement subscribe to the Sustainable Development Goals, not just in practice, but in making our volunteers, our peers, our members, and the community conscious of these goals and their importance to society. Through us, our credit unions will spread the awareness to our communities, and from there, we will all have a positive impact worldwide and be a positive force in the recovery of the economy. There is no better aspiration than to work from the ground up on making prosperous individuals into growing communities, and those communities into agents of economic, social, and environmental change. Now, it is my honor and privilege to continue with this and thank the UNFCU who have created and organized the Sustainability Summit. It is thanks to their ingenuity, leadership, organizational powers that we are here today. I also want to thank the amazing panelists for sharing their knowledge and experience, and to you all, the participants, for being part of the sustainability vision to have an industry-wide impact in the United States and beyond. Today's sessions are jam-packed with useful and exciting information. And to do that, now I have to jump and introduce Annie Griffiths. It is really a pleasure and an honor for me to do so. Annie will be the keynote speaker. She was one of the first women photographers to work for National Geographic. She has worked in nearly 150 countries during her illustrious career, producing dozens of magazines and book projects for National Geographic. This includes stories on Lawrence of Arabia, Galilee, Petra, Sydney, and Jerusalem. Deeply committed to photographing for 8 organizations around the world, Annie founded Ripple Effect Images. She serves as the executive producer of this collective of photographers and filmmakers who document 8 programs that are empowering women and children in developing countries. Ripple's work has helped 26 nonprofits raise over $10 million. Annie has published 4 books. She's a regular guest speaker on NPR, The Today Show, and other media outlets, the National Geographic, the National Press Photographers Association, the National Organization of Women, and the White House News Photographers Association have each presented Annie with awards. Annie Griffiths' keynote is on redefining our relationship to the planet and to each other. She will discuss inspiring actions to secure a planet in balance through stories of women's sustainability projects. She will also share some of her riveting photography. We are especially fortunate that she is here today. With no further ado, please, Annie, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Carlos. And I hope everybody out there is hunkered down safely and in a healthy place as we continue through this really difficult time. But I think it's more important than ever that we come together as community and remember, some of the important work that we are all interested in doing and can do, even when we're locked in our houses. So let me begin with my show. And here we go. There we go. This is complicated, so I want to do it correctly. There we go. I've had the incredible pleasure of working for National Geographic for many years. And what I knew when I began, but what became more and more important to me was I realized that the world was so beautiful. This is from the part of the United States that I come from, this little picture. But through National Geographic, I was able to travel to all 7 continents and see how important it is to save what we have. I think, the glory of travel is it gives you perspective. And you come to realize that that there is so much out there that depends on us. And we can take the planet in a direction of success, or we can take the planet down. So early on, I became really interested in climate change and what climate change was doing, and how perhaps my photography could help remind people first of how beautiful the world is, but then also of how at risk it is. And sometimes it's difficult to show the problems, but it's possible. So, for example, this picture of white pelicans, it's beautiful, but you can see that there's an unnatural shape in the marshland there. And that's because it's been completely carved up by the oil industry in south of Louisiana. And so this really important filter to the coast has been sliced up by humans to make it more accessible for fossil fuels. That's a problem. This is all that remains of the mighty Colorado River as it reaches the Sea of Cortez. And it's all been siphoned off for human use in the United States. So imagine the devastation that causes for all the living things that depend on that fresh water flowing into the Sea of Cortez. And this is the Dead Sea, which is evaporating at such a rate that there are just these salt mounds left behind. It's shrinking at an alarming rate. It's real. And so are the creatures we love, who are completely dependent on us protecting their environment. And I am a believer in solutions. I have no interest in throwing up my hands and saying, it's horrible, it's hopeless. Instead, I believe that we can make a difference. And without me realizing at the time, I actually saw the solution when I was 25 years old on the first time I left the United States. I went to the country of Namibia, and I went and was with a very remote tribe of women, the Ovahimba. They had been living through 7 years of serious drought and were surviving. They had also never seen a Caucasian woman before. And so, I think to them I looked like a bug. I had these glasses and this pale white skin. But what I love about this picture is that it looks like two girlfriends talking. And that's how it felt, even though we didn't have a syllable of shared language. What we had was deeper than that. And in the time I spent with them, my life changed. I knew that they were worried about their kids because the drought was so severe. And we communicated by pantomime, but we communicated directly, no interpreter. And it was very easy for them to do that too. So they would hold up a breast and point to their mouths. And I knew they were saying, can you help us? Do you have some magic medicine or something to help my milk come in for my babies? Because they were worried, as any mother would be. This is where they lived. I think it's the most beautiful desert in the world. But can you imagine finding lunch for yourself and your kids? And here's the thing I learned. They did. They kept their kids alive. They had core knowledge of where to find moisture and food. And they lived in concert with the wildlife in the area. And it was kind of astonishing to see the respect that existed between the wildlife and the human life. And when they made a kill, they used every cell of that animal for something. I don't think they had a word in their language for waste. So I realized that women were survivors. They were not to be pitied. They were to be supported because they were extraordinarily smart, resourceful, hardworking, funny, and capable of helping us change our world. Now, in my work, I have met many celebrities and, politicians and everything, but there's only one time in my life that I asked if I could have my picture taken with a famous person. And that was this picture. And this is Muhammad Yunus, who started the Grameen Bank system in Bangladesh. And the reason he is such a hero to me was he was the first person who proved globally that women are a great investment. And the microfinance program that he began is now a household word. And that household word unconsciously helps people understand women pay it back. Women pay it forward. They're a great investment. So I got to a point in my career where I really was more interested in my images being useful than beautiful, hopefully both. But I realized that I had a unique perspective on what women in the developing world could do and who they really were, and that I needed to help them my way, which is by telling their stories and letting them tell their stories so that people would change their notion of who these women were. They have no interest in being pitied. They do need support, but they really want to do the rest, just like the rest of us. And they, if we teach them how to drill wells, how to solve water problems, that frees them up in so many ways, because in climate change, women are the ones who go for the water, who are responsible for finding it. And we've covered programs where women once traveled as much as 11 hours a day to get really bad water. But by giving them a little cement and a little knowledge, they'll do the rest happily. And then their lives change, as does the life of their daughters. Helping them get the rights to their land. There are groups of people who are completely robbed of the land that they own. This is in Brazil, where that was very much the case. But the number one thing is education. It's education. And I'm so happy to say that every year more and more girls are going to school. The recognition that all children must be educated has become a global, very positive force. And boy, do these kids want to learn. Boy, do they want to know. I see the light in their eyes in every simple classroom I go to. And the potential of girls who are able to go to school is mind-boggling. They're going to marry later. They're going to have fewer children. They're going to make, a tremendous progress in being self-sufficient, and therefore not being held hostage by anything. This is the poorest woman I've ever met. And I say that because she lost 7 children to malnutrition. And at one point she got a little micro loan, and she started a food business along the road in her village. And one day, this little girl on the right was walking down the road. She was 2 years old and naked and was an orphan. And this woman took her in and realized that she needed to get her milk. So she took the little bit of earnings she had and she bought a goat. And you can see there the little girl is holding a goat. And from that goat, her first thing was to get milk for the baby. And then after that, she realized she could breed goats. So she had more goats. And eventually her food business also meshed with her goat business. And the first thing she did was to take the earnings she had and send her little girl to school. And that, that beautiful act by a very simple woman has given her daughter opportunity and her opportunity. So I spent the day with them, and as I was going to leave, this little girl came over to me and asked me for my pen and paper. And I gave it to her, and she walked over to show me that she had taught her mom to read and write. That's the ripple effect. That's what happens. Women and girls pay it forward. And even women who haven't had the luxury of an education are still smart and capable of learning. So this is in Indonesia, where there was a terrible problem with malnutrition. But women were taught how to weigh and measure their kids and nutritional facts to make sure that they were growing properly. This is in a very remote part of Vietnam. And these people had never even heard of a germ. How would they know? We assume so much. But this little program taught them how to keep their babies healthier by washing, by nutritional advice, really simple stuff that was absolutely changing the childhood mortality in the region. This is in India, where these women have never been to school, but they're smart. And so they're being taught how to create solar lanterns. And this woman right here is taking her final exam, where she's given a broken solar lantern and asked if she can fix it. Well, she did, and she passed. And the next day, she got to go back to her village with the 50 solar lanterns she had built and the parts for 50 more, and share them with her girlfriends who had never had electricity or any kind of artificial light. And look at her body language. That is empowerment. And look at the girlfriends. They're just dreaming of what they can do now that they have the ability to extend the day. They're going to be safer. They're going to be more productive. Their kids are going to be able to study. This woman had never had a day of formal education, but she was taught to run a solar desalination plant in one of the most saline areas of India. She is now like bigger than the mayor in that town. And this little girl was working in salt mines. And I went there with a health group because it takes a terrible toll on their little bodies. And it's mostly done by girls and women. And so I was covering the story for the health reasons. But at the end of the day, this little girl went over and she had a solar lantern, which I hadn't seen. And so I said to her, well, what do you do now that, what can you do with your solar lantern? And she said she goes to school at night. And because she has to work during the day. And then I did some research and found out that 70,000 children in this region were going to night school because of solar lanterns. That's what's going to get them out of poverty. That's what their future is resting on. We forget that women are the farmers, the majority of farmers in many parts of the world. And yet they are often helpless in terms of controlling what happens to their product and how it's priced. But they're coming together in cooperatives. So this is a cooperative in India, and the woman on the right is the farmer, and she's brought in her crop, and the woman on the left is telling her what the quality and they've graded it and weighed it and what it's worth. Meanwhile, out back is the commodities broker, and she's calling down to the local market to find out the going price of that product that day. And then she undersells it by a few rupees, and she sold it all. That's what women can do. And once they learn the skills and getting the confidence to work together to solve these issues, the whole world changes for them. This is in Tanzania, where it was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. These traditional Maasai women who live in villages like you see behind them had taken it upon themselves to help the other women. And so they would travel each day to a different boma, and they would go inside and build a safe chimney to get the smoke out of the house, because indoor household pollution is the single biggest killer of women in the developing world. And watching them work, watching this chimney come through the roof of that house and seeing their joy, and they arrive with the bricks and then they build, they make the mud, they do it all themselves. And then the next day they come back with a solar panel and they sit down and they completely from scratch build all the mechanics to run that solar panel. And I love this picture because the two women in blue are putting this together. And there were two men, the guy in red and the guy in orange, who were watching them. And then they came over, this guy in orange finally came over and said, how'd you learn to do that? And in Africa, if there's a job men don't want to do, they say it's women's work. And so the woman just said, hey, it's women's work. Imagine now, you see this little girl carrying her little sister. Imagine what she's going to know inside when she sees that it's the women in her community that is making their homes safe, putting up solar lights so that the wild animals will not keep them inside their houses all night. That'll scare them away, and it will give them so much. And she is now realizing her own potential. So we can do this. If we can continue to help people understand what a great investment women are, if we can come together and support these women by believing in them and giving them the resources that they need to change their own lives, then there's a very happy future ahead for many countries. And we can all do something. We just can all do something. And that's why I started Ripple Effect Images. Now it's a group of extraordinary photographers and filmmakers. And our goal is to shine a light on success and shine a light on the fact that the greatest hope for our shared future is to invest in women. Thank you. Now, would we like to have some questions and answers?
Absolutely. We already have at least one question in from the viewers. First question. One of our participants is absolutely moved to tears, and I would agree. These are incredibly powerful and inspiring images. How are you handling your work from an emotional point of view? How does that, when you're, well, I'll leave it there. How are you handling this work and what you're seeing emotionally?
Honestly, it is incredibly uplifting. Even in the saddest of circumstances, to see women trying and to see this miracle that happens when you can bring women together so that they can talk together, they can dream together, and to literally watch a woman's spine straighten when she sees some hope, when, and to see the incredible seriousness they give to the knowledge that's shared with them and how they employ it and they pay it forward and they tell their girlfriends. And suddenly, we were in one area where they had never seen fat babies before, but through solar powered kitchen gardens, all of a sudden their children were healthy even during the drought. And they would hold up their babies and dance them around because they were fat and they were so proud of them. Well, we expect fat babies. Mm-hmm. So, it's that the gift of knowledge, the gift of a little bit of support, and I think most of all, the gift of believing that they can do it.
Amazing, Annie. Thank you. I mean, I know, again, as I said, powerful, moving, and inspiring. I think even at this summit here, credit unions, we're not the largest financial institutions in the financial services sector, but I think you've definitely inspired me to know that even though we're not the largest, we can have this ripple effect, especially, as a group, as we're coordinated and amplifying each other. And I know here at UNFCU specifically, our UNFCU Foundation, there's a lot of resonance with what you're showing and sort of the work of our foundation too. So just incredible, and quite an honor. I think I'd like to see attendees. Thank you, moving, inspiring, and we'll definitely be following Ripple Effect. I think that's an amazing work you're doing. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity to share your work with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to transition to someone else, another great female woman who's doing work with UNFCU, someone who's really close to UNFCU's heart, and has been with UNFCU on a sustainability journey from I think the beginning, really helping us. Kimberly Kosmenko. Kimberly is the founder and managing director of Kosmenko & Co., a registered B Corp out of Boulder, Colorado. Her company is a certified B Corp. And if you're not familiar with B Corps, B Labs is an organization that coordinates. It does a lot of great work in sustainability, and whose certification is one of the top certifications out there for corporations to get. Credit unions, though, can't become certified B Corps, I should mention that, but doesn't mean we can't hold our suppliers and other partners and people we work with to this kind of standard. Kimberly has been a great resource for us since 2015. She helped us implement our strategy and kept us on track throughout the years. She's an expert in business integration with the SDGs. Kimberly led an early phase background research behind the UN Global Compacts and then B Lab's SDG Action Manager, which we saw yesterday from UN Global Compact. This was a collaboration with the Center for Ethics and Social Responsibility. She's also teaches graduate courses on sustainability and business and leadership at the University of Colorado. Coming to us from Boulder, Kimberly will now lead a discussion on best practice and accelerating your own sustainability journey. Take it away, Kimberly.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Good morning, everyone. And Tom, thank you so much. I have to say, starting off, it has been such a pleasure working with UNFCU, and I'm thrilled to be here with you. As Tom said, I'm coming to you from Boulder, Colorado. So if you imagine some beautiful mountains just behind me, you're looking west on my screen, and the mountains are right behind me. But I don't actually want to start my talk talking about myself. I'd like to start my talk talking about a 25-year-old graduate student named Avery. So Avery is one of the students Tom mentioned that I teach who's really interested in this idea of resilience planning. Resilience planning is thinking about how do we design our communities and how do we design our businesses so that when hazards inevitably happen, as climate change continues to impact us, as those of us in the arid West continue to have issues with water availability, as we continue to try to figure out how do we build our communities back from the incredible level of racial injustice we're experiencing, resilience planning says, how do we become adaptable to move forward? And that's Avery's real interest. Avery comes from a background in geology, worked as a project engineer for a number of years, and is in a class that I teach on how do we build movements for sustainable business. And in this class, we talk about things like the fact that BlackRock, the largest asset manager in the world, as I'm sure you're all familiar, is now asking all of their portfolio companies to report on their climate change impacts, to look at their sustainability and DEI metrics. That Danone, one of the largest CPG companies in the world, is a certified B Corp. That Novozymes, a European biotech company, is acting very intentionally in the SDGs. We talk about all these things in the class and we analyze these cases. And when we do that, we're in a virtual classroom that feels an awful lot like the environment we're in now. We've got our Zoom box. All of us have, our squares. There's 15 of us in the class. I see all the students in their boxes. And more often than not, the students who have chosen to be in this class, Avery and all of the other colleagues, they come, they're excited, they're interested, they're ready to make a difference. They want to see what they can do in the private sector for sustainability. But there's a day recently when that really changed. I came to class a week ago and we were discussing an incredibly important case. We were talking about how do we build equity into society, and looking at, in 2018, as many of you will remember, there was an incident at Starbucks where two Black men, Rashawn Nelson and Dante Robinson, were sitting in a Starbucks in Philadelphia. They hadn't purchased a coffee yet, but as they were sitting there, a store manager of that Philadelphia Starbucks called the police because Starbucks policy at that time said that you couldn't sit in the store without purchasing something. Those two men were arrested, they were brought to jail, they were eventually let go without charges, but it sent an incredible ripple effect through the business world, realizing how deep this sense of inequity is in how we operate, even with companies such as Starbucks that has a strong sense of equity, a strong sense of DEI in their work. And when we were discussing this case, my students who were usually really engaged in our conversations about sustainability and impact and equity they were just quiet. They just felt defeated. I wasn't getting much of a response from them. And I knew it was a heavy case and I knew it was hard for them to discuss. And I had a feeling there was something more going on. So I asked them, I said, what's happening today? Usually we have a really good conversation. And Avery and my other students said, look, you know what, here we are in class. We really care about this, but in our backyard here in Colorado, there's wildfires that are being induced by climate change and bad forest management over a number of years. And we're literally seeing flames from our homes as our forests are burning down, as we're losing our ecosystems and are losing our wildlife. We're here on Zoom because of COVID. We're grad students, we're in our 20s, we want to connect, we want to meet people, we want to be social with each other. But we're not able to do that, and we feel like we're not getting everything we had hoped for from our graduate experience. And they said, we're scared. We're in graduate school. We're spending a lot of money on tuition. We don't know if we're going to be able to come out and get jobs with the economy the way it is right now. They said that talking about cases like Starbucks, they felt so worried about the state of racial equity and equity for all other groups that have been marginalized in our society, and the violence that was coming out of that. They were fatigued by being on Zoom all the time, and they were deeply worried about the election, and they just didn't know what to do. And I understood where they were coming from. At the end of class, Avery really summarized it. And if we had this conversation, we discussed the case, Avery said, look, I know that all of us here, we're 20-somethings, we're the young generation, we're the future. We're here to learn, we're here to address these major issues. but I just can't stop scrolling through the New York Times election polls. I keep looking and I keep looking and I keep looking, and I'm scared and I don't know what's going to happen. And I just don't know if I can handle this. And I share that story with you, and we can go to the next slide. I share that story with you because I want to give you some context of where I'm coming from when I'm sharing some recommendations from you. My role as a consultant is I work with great organizations like UNFCU to be able to say what's happening in the world that we need to address is real. And we heard that oh my gosh, we saw those beautiful photos about both the challenges and the opportunities. It's really real. And I come at this work knowing that there's not a formulaic way for us to think about positive impact. There's not a formulaic way to think about going after sustainability. Instead, there's this real humanity of both our younger generation and people throughout society feeling an incredibly strong need to address the way we do business together and to change it so that we really can be more resilient and more regenerative. So with that, with that as the backdrop, what I want to do with you today, next slide, next slide after that. What I want to do with you today is to give you some of the inside track of how I've worked with organizations to help them set goals and take action on a really holistic approach to sustainability impact, and to be able to really do that with integrity so it's meaningful for the work that your credit union is doing. Next slide. Thank you. What I'm going to go through with you today, first of all, I want to talk about materiality. And I'll explain what that is in a minute. In a nutshell, materiality is how do you figure out what's important that you need to address within your organization. And I'll give you some guiding principles to go about building up your sustainability work, whether it's you might be just starting on the journey. You might have joined United in Sustainability because your credit union is just beginning on the journey of sustainability and impact. Or I know we've also got a lot of folks here who are well along the way. You've been working in this area for a while. I want to give you some guiding principles that can support you in both cases, and then help you on how do you get alignment on your strategy? How do you pick the right data? How do you engage your members? Now, if we were in person, I'd be asking you all to pop in, jump up, raise your hands and ask me questions that we're going through, but that's not necessarily going to work in this format. What I do hope you'll do is, as I'm going through this, let it spark some questions for you. Go ahead, drop those questions into the chat. And I'm going to leave plenty of time at the end of my talk so that I can ask your specific questions and see if in the time we've got here together today, I might be able to give you some insight or some suggestions that'll help for wherever you might be in your journey. Next slide. Now, I mentioned how my students are feeling about COVID. We all know very, very well that 2020 has brought us a new kind of awkward moment. That's the moment when you're deciding you want to spend some time with a friend, or you want to see if your kids can go play with the neighbors, and you've got to have the COVID talk, the COVID safety talk. How are we going to go about doing this? There's an interesting article that just showed up in the New York Times yesterday showing that fully 25% of adults will actually lie to other people about how often they wear a mask, about how much they do distancing, because we're all really sensitive that our personal choices right now are under a microscope in society as to, are we contributing to the cause of being able to address the pandemic, being able to address COVID? And we as a society don't fully agree on how we're supposed to do this. So fundamentally, we've become very hyper aware about the ripple effects that our individual choices have. And in an interesting way, this is feeding into a conversation about sustainability that's very different than what I've seen before this year, because that sense of our interconnectedness with COVID has actually brought us really much more aware to our interconnectedness with our supply chains. Up until this year, most of us who have spent our whole lives living in the United States never knew what it felt like to go to a grocery store and not be able to find toilet paper. Now we can probably all relate on that experience. the experience of going through COVID has fundamentally exposed the vulnerabilities that we have, that particularly for those of us who are in generally well-off communities based here in the United States, we haven't felt that sense of economic and personal vulnerability in the same way we have in the COVID era. It's been both an equalizer for those of us who have the good fortune to have a nice home, to be able to have access to supplies, to reconnect with what it's like to have income insecurity, food insecurity, water insecurity. But it's also something that is making it both easier and harder to take action on sustainability because of this moment of ambiguity and confusion and change that we're in. And I want to share with you, in the work that I've been doing, I've actually found that, if you remember my story about Avery at the beginning of this talk, Avery's interest in resiliency has turned out to be really the approach that's been more right for this moment, and that's become more and more popular within the world of how our business is going to deal with this. We're going to deal with this moment in time by making sure that as we build our programs around sustainability impact, even for those of us who are small organizations, and I mostly work with small to mid-sized businesses, including UNFCU, that we want to be able to look at how we're operating, that we can not just say we're going to take a little bit of progress on climate change, we're going to take a little bit of progress on water security, but that we're going to be able to build into our organizations, how can we help our organizations and our communities to be more resilient to the next challenge that we need to face, whether it's the next wildfire or the next pandemic or the next issue with climate change. These topics are heavy. They're very heavy, but I also feel like we absolutely have the tools to be able to address them. Next slide. The first thing we can do is say, look at our businesses and figure out what are the particular areas of environmental and social impact that are unique to how we operate, where we have the most impact. So some of you, because I'm talking to a lot of people who work in the world of financial services, many of you will be familiar with the concept of materiality coming from the financial context. So within the world of financial reporting and accounting, something that is financially material isn't something you want to make sure you shows up on your financial reports, that you're taking into account for your budgeting, that it's a significant enough financial choice or a significant enough expense that you need to be very careful about tracking it and making it transparent. It's actually not that different in the world of sustainability. We have a concept of materiality that says what you'll need to do as a business to make sure that the work that you're doing is meaningful, that it is actually really genuinely going to benefit the community, is to first understand within your operations and within the sphere of influence that you have, what are the environmental and social impacts that you have that not only are the biggest impacts, but also that you can influence by making choices within your organization. And the way you go about doing this is figuring out, how do we operate as an organization? Within the credit union space, there's some really common topics that come up as being material over and over again. And you can see them on the slides here. Climate and greenhouse gas emissions. Not only is climate one of the most important sustainability issues that we need to deal with, all of us, whether we're working from home or whether we have the opportunity to go into our offices, we all have buildings, we all have branches, we all have physical spaces that are using energy and using resources. Therefore, climate and greenhouse gas emissions are a core concern. Energy, paper, purchasing and supply chain, sustainable investments. And there's a few things on here, depending on where you're at in the sustainability journey, you might not always think about as being part of sustainability. For example, staff total compensation, diversity and inclusion, education. These types of social topics are equally important as we move from a world of segregating environmental and social sustainability to really integrating it. In the same way you heard if you were part of the SDG Action Manager talk yesterday, and you'll get to hear more from Carlene Alexander a little bit later today. And Carlene is fantastic. I think you're going to love her talk. So our first place is figuring out, within all the possible things that we could be focusing on for your particular credit union, pick the ones where you can have the most impact in both the short term and the midterm. Next slide. Now, I'm going to touch lightly on the Sustainable Development Goals as your guiding principles, because I know you've already had a chance to discuss that over the course of yesterday and today. I will be the voice that will once again say to take a truly holistic approach to sustainability, the Sustainable Development Goals are really the place to go. And I think the SDG Action Manager has turned out to be just an absolutely terrific tool that I'm really proud that I got to be part of. Let me give you a few tips when you're trying to set goals that are in alignment with the SDGs. First of all, it's really easy to look at the SDGs, and there's 17 different topics. They're all very important to society. And I often get the question from organizations that are starting to look at, all right, I want to be in alignment with the SDGs. How do I do that? And organizations will try to say, okay, there's 17 SDGs. So how many goals do I need to have? How do I address all these different topics? And every time I get that question, I get that concern, I will say, first of all, hold on. You don't need to address everything all at once, because realistically, any given organization can do a really genuinely good job on a certain subset of these. And what we need to be able to have global movement building change is not necessarily for every single organization, every single credit union to try to address all 17 SDGs all at once, but for you to figure out for your credit union, which of these SDGs can you actually genuinely invest your resources and time and creativity into that can really align with your business model, and pick maybe 3, maybe 5, maybe 7. I'd say typically people who do SDG aligned goals within the business world will usually find 5 to 7, maybe even 9 SDGs that they're very closely aligned with. If I see a sustainability report where a company has tried to say that they're working on all 17 simultaneously, I tend to consider that to be an overstretch, and it's hard to do that effectively. So that's my few words on the SDGs that I'm very happy to talk about in the Q&A period if folks have specific questions. Next slide. When I was talking about the SDGs, I started to get into the question of your strategy and how you're going to get that going. In order to give you an example, I'm going to actually pull back from the credit union industry a little bit and tell you a story about a company in the food industry that I've advised recently. This is a small company called Colorado Mills, and it's a company that I worked with alongside a couple of my students who really did a great job of taking a lead on the project. Colorado Mills is a sunflower oil producer. And I don't know about you all, but I had actually never used sunflower oil in cooking before I started working with Colorado Mills. I honestly didn't really know that much about it as a cooking option. And Colorado Mills it's a small company. They're family owned. They're in rural southern Colorado. And being a family owned company that's been in the families for a couple of generations now, and being in a rural agricultural area, they have a really strong sense of community. They have a very strong sense that Colorado is their home, that all of their employees are Coloradans, most of whom have lived here in the state their entire lives, in some cases for multiple generations, just like the owner of the company. And when they started thinking about what their sustainability approach should be, my students came in, and with guidance from me and guidance from Colorado Mills, they started looking at all of the things that we'd consider to be part of a sustainability journey. Can we do a greenhouse gas inventory? Can we look at the product supply chain? Can we do some energy and water use reduction goals, zero waste goals? But before going into all of that, I advise them to really have good, meaningful, deep conversations with Colorado Mills about what kind of company are they? How do they operate? What is their mission? Who do they serve? And what we learned in that process is that their executive team had a very strong sense that they, not only, as I mentioned before, that they serve their community, but that they wanted to keep their company local. They didn't want to become an oil producer that would try to distribute itself throughout the United States or internationally. They weren't looking necessarily for a lot of business growth in that particular way, but instead they wanted to be able to stay true to their community, and they wanted for more people in Colorado to be able to see that sunflower oil is a sustainable local choice that supports agricultural communities and supports keeping agricultural communities here in the state vibrant. And with that information, the entire sustainability strategy that came out of that was based on sunflower oil being a local product. And that meant that the decisions that the company was looking for was, how do they make their operations efficient? How do they work with other similarly minded food producers within the Front Range who are creating sustainability-oriented and health-oriented foods? How do they align their message and their branding so that more people know about the practices they have in their company? Everything was focused on being a local brand. And so if you take that out to credit unions, looking within your credit union, while credit unions have a lot of similarities in being really wonderful member-owned cooperatives and being responsive to your members, each one of you serves a particular demographic. It might be a regional demographic, it might be people within a particular industry or type of work. And knowing that is going to help you understand what areas of focus in sustainability and in impact are going to be most important to your members, and also what are going to be most aligned with the mission that already exists within your company and the executive decisions and the strategic decisions you're already making. So starting point with strategy, think about where does your impact strategy strengthen your business, make you more resilient, and be particular to the impacts you have. Next slide. Now let's talk about data. Fun, quirky fact about me, as an undergraduate, when I was in college, I was actually an English major. Love writing, love literature, love history. But I was also the quirky English major that took upper level math classes for fun because I thought it was kind of nice to have that quantitative break from doing all the reading and writing. So I kind of have a soft spot for data. I love working with data and metrics. And one of the things that I particularly like about working with companies to figure out what their metrics should be is that you can create a strategy that is wonderful based on all the things that I just described when we were on the previous slide. And you also need to have a way to be able to bake that into accountability on your organization from a day-to-day level. And frankly, to know if you're being successful. One thing that can often happen when people are working on their sustainability plan is that you've set up what your goals are, you know where you want to go, but in the absence of metrics, it's really easy to be guessing. Sustainability is so broad, we can't directly see how we're impacting climate from our work within our organization. It's hard to be able to necessarily know, as we're working on, say, for example, sustainable purchasing, we can't see the forests that we're trying to protect if we're doing sustainable purchasing for paper products. So you need to be able to figure out where are the proxies for those impacts that even if you can't lay eyes on some of the environmental and social impacts from within your office, you've got very carefully selected numerical quantitative proxies to be able to know if you're making progress and to be able to adjust course and to be able to hold yourself accountable towards the goals that you have set over time. And a few examples of these types of metrics would be for your energy use, looking at what is not only what is the overall energy use, but also what is the energy use per employee? What is the energy use per member? What is the energy use per dollar of revenue? So that you can start understanding as you do your sustainability projects, are we both moving the needle on sustainability and are we improving in a way that is proportional to how our business is evolving and growing? Next slide. One of the real opportunities in doing sustainability and impact work is it is such a good way to engage your members. I keep coming back to my students. I love them. I feel like my work is wonderful that I get to both consult with organizations that care about impact and I get to help the next generation do that. And I know that a lot of credit unions are particularly interested in connecting with that younger generation of millennial and Gen Z members and potential members. Through impact and through a really transparent, honest, high integrity story of what you're doing, it's going to help you make those connections. And there's two main ways that credit unions will do that. One is through external communication, and one is through inviting your members to be part of the process of figuring out which sustainability impacts are material and what some of the options are to go after those. I suspect some of you probably already have sustainability or impact reports that you've produced and that you've shared. If you don't, there's some really good ones out there. UNFCU has certainly invested quite a bit of time and effort in theirs, and there's many other credit unions and many other organizations that have really excellent reports. And your report should be highly specific and transparent so that you can include the goals that you're working towards, the metrics you're working towards, so that both your members and other members of the public feel like they've got real transparency into how you're operating on impact. I also mentioned that one of the ways you can engage your members is by inviting them in to be part of your goal setting. When you're figuring out which topics are both are material to your credit union to be able to act on them, and also as you're adjusting and building your programs, it's a real opportunity if you already have a process to do focus groups or surveys or informal conversations with your members, asking them about their views on social and environmental impact is going to get you some new ideas and so your members are at, but it's also going to demonstrate your commitment to them. It's a great opportunity as well for your member-facing staff members, your member service representatives, folks who might be on the phone with members on a regular basis, for them to have opportunities from time to time when it's appropriate to have a touch point and ask members about their views on your sustainability program, or just hear their feedback and their thoughts. I will say with that, one of the things that many of you have probably seen, the bar is increasingly getting higher and higher for how rigorous you need to be in your member communications to have credibility. We've started to see that more and more sustainability reports are being scrutinized to see if all of the numbers add up, and you're getting more pushback as members are increasingly well educated about sustainability and impact decisions. All right, next slide. So bringing this all back together in my in a nutshell slide, on this overall journey, you'll be looking at how are you going to identify your material issues. You can use the SDGs as guiding principles to help you in your work. Work on getting your people, your strategy, and your goals aligned, take data-driven action, engage your members. And I would say as we kind of pull back from those pieces, I really want to bring you back again to the story I shared at the beginning about the younger members of our professional community, our students. For those of you who have children, oftentimes your children, there's an incredibly strong interest in being involved with this work. You're all here today because you care. You know that a lot of your colleagues are interested in being involved. Designing your impact strategy and communicating it out is a real way to build community and to build hope in a time that we truly need it. And I think that's something that I found in my work. I know we've heard that from some of the other speakers. At the same time that we know that 2020 has been an incredibly rough year for all of us, we also know that when we're doing this sort of work that builds resilience, that builds towards a more positive future, it helps us as people to come together and to see that there's an opportunity to create a better world going forward. We're in a transition point, and at the risk of sounding very similar to some of the other folks who've spoken today, I hope that I can amplify what they've said by saying that I hope all of you will really take the opportunity of this transition point to look at your own operations and your own choices and figure out, what can I do next that's going to bring us closer to a more equitable world? Now with that, next slide, we'll wrap up. I really want to thank you so much for having me here. It's been great to talk to you, but what I'm really even more interested in is being able to take your questions. So with that, I'd love to open up to any and all questions that the group has.
Please, everybody, you can put your questions in the chat. We do have one comment that I thought was interesting. It was a recommendation, I guess, when considering SDGs and materiality, about where, to consider the SDGs, where you can be part of a solution and sort of where an organization may be thinking they might be sort of part of the problem. Have you kind of had a kind of a prism or perspective, kind of considering kind of both kind of the positive and sort of consumptive impact of organizations when they're considering their materiality.
That is such a good comment. Yes. So my response to that is to say, part of a really responsible, high integrity approach to going after sustainability impact is going to be looking at where are your operations and business choices causing problems within the community? Are there ways in which you are causing environmental harm or contributing to inequity? Because the fact of the matter is, no matter how positive the intentions of an individual business might be, most companies, most organizations, most nonprofits in some way are having a negative impact at some point in their operations. So it's really important to look at that in addition to looking at the more aspirational pieces of where do we want to see ourselves go as a society and how can the credit union contribute?
We have another question from the chat. What about planning for carbon offsets after we've reduced our carbon footprint? What type of offsets have a solid positive community impact as well as carbon impact?
That is another great question. What I would look for, so let me, from the wording of this question, it sounds like it's coming from someone who knows carbon offsets very well, but let me just give a little context for the group in case this is a new topic for you. First of all, when you're looking at what's colloquially called carbon offsets, can also be called renewable energy credits, you're basically investing in a project that is going to give an alternative to fossil fuel consumption and therefore reduce overall emissions, or you're looking for a project that is going to remove carbon from the atmosphere. There's different ways to be able to find those projects. There's one certification called Green E certification for renewable energy projects that's going to ensure that it's gone through a rigorous process of verifying that particular project as truly giving emissions reductions. There's also, when you're looking for something that's going to have a positive community impact, you want to be looking for projects that are investing within communities that are able to make changes that are durable. There's actually a really good resource through the United Nations where there are carbon offsets that you can invest in that have been vetted by the UN themselves as part of the UN's efforts to both reduce climate impact and to be able to support sustainable development. It's a really good place to be able to look for different options that also then you can choose projects that are in alignment with the particular sustainability goals that your credit union might have. So for example, if your credit union is particularly interested in women's empowerment or is particularly interested in water security, then you've got an option to be able to find something that is both going to reduce carbon impact and it's going to invest in that particular social good.
Oh, that's fantastic. Again, we'll post the Green E certification and this other resources in our LinkedIn group too. So everyone, please join that after this so that you can look those up. Oh, there someone's just asking that we post it. So we'll definitely post all this and make sure it's available. Almost everything, by the way, just a side note, almost everything that we've talked about, links are already available in the LinkedIn group. As you may have seen that already in the chat. We tried to post a lot of those references that were brought up so that people can find them and refer to them later. Okay. And there is a link to the LinkedIn group if you want to join that and take a look at what we've done already in the chat. I don't see any more. Aisha, do we have any more questions for Kimberly? If not, I have one.
Hi, Tom. Oh. No, it looks like you covered all of the questions that came in.
Okay. And one quick question, Kimberly. We've been talking about. I know you worked on it. You talked a lot about it to us, and we've actually already engaged with it because of our relationship with the UN Global Compact. Where would you say engaging with UN Global Compact's SDG Action Manager would be? Where would that kind of tool fit in terms of an organization who's beginning to engage with system? Well, actually, I don't even want to say beginning, because even for us, when we engaged with it at the baseline level, it helped us. But where would you think an organization, where can that tool fit?
Yeah, I think that's a great tool to use as part of your planning process. So when you're, and as you said, Tom, whether you're just getting started or you've already gone fairly far in the journey, hopping into that tool and being able to go through it to say, where am I already doing things within my organization that are aligning with the SDGs? Where am I not? It's going to give some valuable feedback that can go back into the planning process of how do I want to set my goals for next year? Where will they happen? And in terms of who in the organization should be using that tool, it's actually really helpful to get together at least several different people who've got views into different aspects of the credit union operation, people who can speak to what's happening within the HR side of things. If you've got a specific sustainability person, if you have someone who's working on supply chain, if you've got someone who's working on DEI, and have different people within the organization hop in there and be able to respond to questions so you can get a good holistic view that's going to help you plan out what your next steps might be. Did that answer your question?
No, I think so. I think I think some of the functionality that was in there, I think was including and being able to invite other participants. I don't even think we realized that until we had walked through the tool yesterday with you and Global Compact. Okay. So I think we have gotten it. Here's one more. What sustainability standards should credit unions consider and use as a benchmark for their goals? Is there a specific standard you would recommend? We've heard of some of them yesterday.
Yeah, so I think this is, the question sustainability standards, are you thinking specifically standards for reporting or standards for the goals themselves? I'm not sure if we've got the information. Well, let me go after both of those questions. When you're setting the goals, there's not necessarily a defined third-party standard that says these are the specific types of goals that you should set within an organization. But what you can find that's incredibly helpful is third-party standards that talk about what are the material topics that a particular type of organization should look at. And I know some of the things that we've worked with in our work with UNFCU is looking to GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative, which gives some very strong metrics on if you are in the financial services field, here are some particular material issues that you should be looking at, that then you can use that to decide, well, if these are the material issues from our credit union, we should set goals against these particular topics. The SDG Action Manager is helpful for that. And you mentioned B Corp certification. While, as you mentioned, credit unions are not able to become B Corps because only for-profit companies can become B Corps. The B Impact Assessment that B Lab puts out, it's a free tool. And that also does a really good job of helping businesses see where they're at. And when you see where you're at and you see where you might be lacking in some of the sustainability and impact work that you're doing, that's a good place to say, do we need to set a goal in that particular area to bring an underperforming area up? Or is there an area that we're already performing really well and that we want to amplify that by setting a more ambitious goal?
Okay, great. Well, it looks like that's it from the chat in terms of questions. There's good conversation going on, but Kimberly, thank you. I think it's really great to really underscore that this is we talk about it as a journey, but it's sort of like there's no end, right? Where everyone's an evolving process, everyone starts, it's really much more of a continuum that you're always on. So I think it's great for you to kind of re-emphasize that for all of us. I think now we're going to, since you mentioned that, we've talked a little bit about some of UNFCU's journey, which you've been part of, and I think you were there when we were transitioning from our small little green team into this global sustainability program. So, I think everyone should understand that, it can start and move across, great progress in terms of where you begin and where you grow to. So, but we're going to continue the discussion as we divide into groups again. Again, everyone, if you please merge your audio and your video if you've dialed in. We want to be able to take, one of the reasons we're in this networking format as opposed to the webinar format is to be able to do these breakout sessions. So in a few minutes, we're going to break everybody out into their groups and maybe about a minute or two for you guys to divide and kind of chat about what we've already been talking for. And we want to know, again, please have someone in your groups who are going to be taking, if we have a few minutes, we'll try to talk about about what you've talked about and the kind of themes that you guys have been engaged with in terms of your own sustainability journeys and what's really been resonating with you. So with that, Saeed, can you break us out into our networking groups to talk about kind of the major themes that resonated with you most regarding getting started or where you are in your sustainability journey? Hi, Pam.
Nice to see you guys back. Yeah.
Welcome back. Okay, we have a few minutes. Hopefully everyone has come back. Hopefully that was a good discussion. Everyone had some interesting conversations. We can spend a few minutes. Hopefully everyone had a scribe to take some notes. I first will call on our volunteer, if anyone wants to, in the chat, volunteer to talk about anything that came through in their breakout room. And I'll start with room 1. Does room 1 want to share anything?
Well, I'll just jump in. I'm one of the folks from room 1. We did not assign a scribe, so I will kick us off. But my colleagues in room 1 will hopefully add to it. But we were actually having, in terms of insights and resonating, what was resonating with us most. There was some very interesting and rich conversation, just sort of about kind of thinking through sort of sustainability holistically, and sort of this thinking about how, when you combine the various SDG goals, you can be sort of accomplishing sort of true sustainability in so many ways. And Valerie was, just before we got pulled back, was talking a bit about all the different ways at her credit union they are integrating this focus on building a more sustainable household with sustainability products, which is also helping to sustain the credit union, because these are good kind of products and high yielding and to, a lot of that. And Casey was talking a lot about the extenuating kind of member engagement, and how sort of a focus on the SDGs enables members to be bringing to the credit union some really, interesting opportunities to do more in the communities sort of around the Americas that they're serving. Hope I captured most of that.
That's great. I mean, I think that, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but I think that there's a theme we have about community impact and the relationship that credit unions specifically have with their communities, to be leaders amongst our field of membership. We usually have such a much close, tighter relationship with our field of membership than as opposed to just like consumers, but actually kind of being in and members of our community. That's really, really powerful. Do we have someone from group 2 who wants to speak? Oh, that's Kathy. Valerie's agreeing with you, Kathy. So anyone from group 2? How about group 3? Anyone in group 3?
Whether you can hear me.
Hello, who's that? Is that Liz?
Yes, yeah, hi.
Hi, Liz. Hi.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that that our group really felt the overpowering feeling of hope, and in the fact that the resiliency certainly demonstrated by the moving and powerful images of women, and then just hearing Kimberly laying out the path for credit unions. We felt that there was certainly much to look forward to, despite the fact that that the year has been so uncertain. So talked about that, and then the fact that that members are asking more sustainability questions. At the AGM, we learned from Van City that is a particular increase and uptick, even though Van City is certainly very, very much the pioneers in this sustainability space, but how important and increasingly so sustainability has becoming top of mind for members in the wake of COVID and some of the events on the West Coast with fires and so forth.
We've heard Kimberly talk about that same issue of the fires on Colorado and the impact in the West. We have about one more, well, we're almost out of time. Does anyone in any other group want to share anything really powerful in terms of the theme?
This is Miles 3, if that's okay.
Hi, Miles.
Hi.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Melissa and I were just texting. I think, one of the things that we talked about as a group was that you start, in terms of what we're doing, in terms of sustainability, kind of starting with the mundane, the operational, the low-hanging fruit, the lights and everything else. I really talked about their, the amount of solar that they're producing and offsetting. They save something like $280,000 over the last few years, producing nearly, they get like 98 kilowatts per kilowatt hours. They have a 98 kilowatt system that they have out down there in Puerto Rico. But I think the really powerful piece is our ability as financial institutions to create the products that drive innovation and drive the clean energy economy, as well as supporting local small businesses and entrepreneurs who are doing purpose-driven businesses. And I think that that's where we all kind of need to go. And then lastly, we talked about a couple of organizations that are collaborative, kind of like UIS that we are all either part of or joining. We talked about the Global Alliance for Banking on Values, which is worldwide now and has a lot of great resources, as well as the CDFI Climate Crisis Working Group. I know Melissa's part of that, and she was going to send that link around. So some other resources that should probably be added to the LinkedIn site and shared around.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think, again, touching on that sort of theme you mentioned, Miles, in terms of the impact we can have on our communities through, I think as credit unions specifically, for those local, entrepreneurs who can have impact in the community and be recognized as really leaders in the community. This is actually something we think a lot about in our GSP program and United Sustainability, about that, again, that community impact. I'm going to move us along. Fantastic. We will share all these links that everyone's talking about. And again, the theme in our group I'll just mention is also, as you mentioned, this, starting small. You can start in those kind of mundane or smaller things, but it starts having some great momentum that really can carry us forward. But with that, thank you for everybody for those kind of valuable thoughts and insights. Please post anything you would like to share in the chat. We're going to try to collect all that and post it into our LinkedIn group. So these are resources and valuable artifacts that people can come back to and maybe join if they only kind of learn about our movement later. Again, I think what's coming back to something we were talking about a little bit yesterday, as Dr. Taylor Nelms filings underscored, during his keynote, diversity, equity, inclusion are sort of an integral part of sustainability. Kimberly talked about that as well. In just a few minutes, you're going to learn a little bit about volunteerism through business or employee resource groups can lead the way to social justice and jumpstarting that kind of meaningful conversations inside your organization, with your staff and leadership. In addition, you'll have the opportunity to test your knowledge on DEI. That's one of, Carlene loves to make these interactive sessions when she talks to us. So we're going to turn this over to Carlene Alexander, our Global Diversity Officer here at UNFCU. Over the past 20 years at UNFCU, Carlene has held a steady progression of roles within human resources. She also serves on the advisory council of the UNFCU Foundation. Carlene holds a master's degree in human resources and labor relations from Baruch City College in New York, as well as a diversity and inclusion professional certificate from Cornell. She's a member of our society. She's a member of the Society of Human Resources Management, as well as our HR, as well as HRNY. Carlene, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tom. I mean, what can I say? The last sessions have just been incredible. If you do not feel a sense of hope in listening to everything you have heard, watching Annie's pictures, the one takeaway I have leaving this session is that there is hope. There are practical ways to do everything. And with all this learning taking place, as part of learning, we all have to test our knowledge. So the first thing I'm going to do is welcome you to the United in Sustainability University and give you a chance to see how much do you really know. Saeed, if you can put the... Okay, so take a few moments and just go through the questions. You can answer them and we'll discuss shortly. Okay, Saeed, so whenever you have the results ready, we can share with everybody. Hopefully everybody will be able to see these on their screens. All right. Well, first of all, how amazing is that? 70% of us have some type of DEI program in our organization, other 22% working on it, and the other 9% are definitely going to get started once they're done here today. Interestingly enough, the population that is expected to see the largest increase in the US between 2010 and 2050 is the mixed race population. So that's something, learning experience for all. And then who typically banks with the credit union? And yes, the answer to that is indeed the median income population. So why are these questions important? Why did I select these questions? Well, first of all, one thing we have learned in 2020 is the impact that everything in the society is having on the populations we serve. And one thing that the credit union industry, in fact, every industry has to know very well is the populations they serve. And knowing the populations they serve definitely, and how to look at that with a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens is extremely important. So can we turn to the next slide, Saeed? So let's talk about that. So yesterday, we heard Taylor Nems from Filene speak, and he said something that really resonated with me. And it is that talking about DEI done right. So how do you do DEI right? What's involved in that process? So for UNFCU, one of the things we knew was important is to align our DEI strategy or program with UNFCU's strategic plan. And as a core value for the organization, one way we keep our eyes on the prize is by embracing diversity. That is a core value for UNFCU. And most importantly, your people resources. What makes DEI successful? The employee volunteerism is a key to that process. Equally important to us is that DEI, our DEI program, like all our CSI programs, align with our UN Sustainable Development Goals. And for the DEI, the three we align most closely with are 8, decent work and economic growth, 5, gender equality, and 10, reduced inequalities. Next slide, Saeed. So how do we do this? How do you talk about social justice, COVID, everything happening in the society? What does that have to do with DEI? Well, a meaningful way to start the conversation is through our business resource groups. And that is what UNFCU did. We have 3 business resources currently, a women's BRG, an LGBTQ plus BRG, and a multicultural BRG. And leveraging these groups to have these conversations, which were perhaps once taboo, but which gives us a really good, meaningful understanding of our populations and also of the populations we serve. Because let's face it, our employees are a reflection of our society. And the thoughts and the feelings they're having are also thoughts and feelings that are being shared by the society at large. So understanding that is very impactful. Next slide, please, Saeed. So how do these conversations get started? And what do you do with that information? Next slide. So when 2020 began, I almost think UNFCU had a looking glass, because in February, when our multicultural BRG launched the African American Black History Month, one of the things they did is do a museum event for our organization called Black Citizenship in the Days of Jim Crow. I mean, the knowledge they imparted, what employees walked away was amazing. And who could have predicted then in February that this racial inequality and the social justice would be a topic? But our BRGs, the multicultural BRG, had already given our employees insight into the experience of this minority group. In fact, one of the things they did was to ask, what is the vision of the organization for 2020 and beyond? What are the employees feeling? And the slide that says, a world without limits, love, mercy, do justice, care for the least of these, the oppressed and the marginalized. That is just one of the statements. And there were many statements expressed by our employees of how they envision the world beyond 2020. Our employees also we do something called courageous conversations. And that allows us to put a forum in which we speak openly about the social, economical, political factors affecting our employee population, and as a result, our membership. So just last Wednesday gone, our LGBTQ had a courageous conversation in which they talked about how religion, culture, and values impact the LGBTQ community in our society and in our workplace. In fact, one of our employees, and that was indeed really brave, because she spoke of her experience being an employee in Nairobi, African American, a society which does not readily accept this, and the impact it had on her. And talked about being away from her sister for 15 years, who had to leave the country because she identified as a lesbian. And the support she got from her co-workers was very impactful in helping her feel that her voice was heard. So right there, we see how we are beginning to impact the systems that are causing the issues for us by really beginning the work in our workplace. Our multicultural BRG also, as part of their book club, something they did, read The New Jim Crow. Again, I say UNFCU had this looking glass. It's almost like we could see what was going to come, and we began addressing it ahead of time. We also had Zoom calls on allyship, on white privilege, and the value there is employees felt comfortable to bring their full selves and their experiences and share it, enlighten each other as people ask questions openly. And that's important because if our employees are experiencing this, so are our members. So imagine the empathy our employees can now bring to those we serve. Next slide, please, Said. And then that number 47%, that actually represents the number of employees who are DI champions, I call them, and articulate advocates. What does that mean? These are the number of my employees at UNFCU engaged in our BRG. These are the frontline people embedding and weaving the story into our culture and really helping UNFCU achieve its goal of embracing diversity. UNFCU has approximately 630 employees, and imagine these employees on the front line, bringing their colleagues along, talking and helping them get started. That is how you do this work. You engage your core resource, your people. And when they're fighting for you, I mean, that's half the battle right there. Additionally, UNFCU engages in a lot of learning. So previously, we had done unconscious bias for our employees. We had done the fundamentals of DEI. And this year, again, as if by a looking glass, somewhere in the future we basically began a learning on cultural competence. So in January, we launched our first cultural competence series, and the entire organization gets to do that. And what it does is it helps employees understand how people will bring their culture, their beliefs, their systems into the workplace, and how it impacts the way we interact with them. What time means to me in my culture as against to what time means to somebody else in their culture. And how these things can also be used to understand our membership and understand our membership and really work with them serving these parameters. What I think is important here is to understand that this is how we go about changing the systems we are currently talking about, using and leveraging our volunteers. Volunteers are key to us in our DI, using our BRGs, in our UNFCU Foundation, they are key, and even in our Global Sustainability Program. I mean, they are the lifeblood of what helps us going and definitely helping us to immerse ourselves and really make the fundamental changes. When you have these volunteers, they really spread the word. I mean, for me personally, global sustainability has made me so aware. I'm at home now, I'm thinking about what I'm putting in my garbage. What am I doing with used batteries? I mean, just recently, somebody from PSC&G came to speak to me, which is my electricity company, and they were talking to me about how coal and fossil fuels are still being included on my bill and what I must do to change. And typically, as somebody came to speak to me at my front door, not too much. But now they forced me to stop and listen. And I listened because of how the global sustainability team had influenced me. So I end this by saying, you have the resources, you have the people. Educate them, involve them. That is how we change a system, one by one, but you have the resources you need. So go ahead, engage them, find out the answers, speak to them, communicate them with them, and let them lead the way. They are very capable and enthusiastic and ready and willing to do it. So you have what it takes. You have the foundation, go ahead and do it. Thank you very much. And I'll take any questions we may have now.
Any questions from the group? And Aisha, do we see anything in the chat about how to engage staff and to really get them involved into your DEI and feel kind of like they're connected to it?
Right now, there's no comments in the chat. Everyone, please feel free to send your comments directly, put your comments directly in the chat so that we could address it and Carlene could answer. Thank you.
You know, it's funny, we've, at UNFCU, Carlene mentioned it a few times, you know, about how sometimes it feels like we were, you know, looking into a glass ball, predicting what might happen, right? But it's, I think what it is that these things are happening, right? And so just engaging at all, you know, we're going to be better prepared for whatever happens, whether it's another year like 2022, 2020, or hopefully not like a decade like 2020, but having and engaging are critical, you know, to helping organizations be ready for what's coming, whether it's on sustainability, DEI. So how are the business groups funded, if they are, and what decision rights do they have to act independently? We'll take that question before we transition to our next panel.
So thankfully, we have a very supportive leadership. So our BRGs do get a sizable budget, which enables them to spend a lot of time engaging the community. And they use that budget and in a very creative way. Even with COVID, I have to say the budget was helpful. And even if most of us have been working virtually, our BRGs have engaged people. The book clubs, we are getting ready to celebrate Diwali. We've had the courageous conversations. They used it to get top of the line speakers to come in and to really get the information out there. So I have to say, thanks to our leadership and our CEO right on down, gives us a lot of support, and we do have the budget needed to be able to do these things we want to do.
All right, I think that's really important for all of these initiatives, that these are top-down initiatives. And speaking of which, I know we have a couple of questions. Hopefully, Carlene, you can get to them in the chat, but I do want to talk about top-down leadership and one of the more inspiring leaders that we've been interacting with here at UNFCU and in our sustainability program. And that's Kathy Mann, from the President and CEO of Inclusive. She's going to be moderating a discussion on green products, and her part Kathy has led Inclusive since 2012, overseeing a period of dramatic growth and expansion for the organization and their network. She's committed to the mission of promoting financial inclusion and building more inclusive community economies through community-owned and controlled financial institutions. Kathy previously served as Deputy Commissioner at the New York City Department of Consumer Affairs, and she started and led New York City's Office of Financial Empowerment. Given the subject matter and expertise and geographical spread of our panel, I'm sure the conversation will be purpose-filled. And again, it's one of our great pleasure to know Kathy and interact with her, one of the great leaders in our industry. So Kathy, please take it away.
Wow, thank you so much, Tom. That means so much coming from you and the entire team at UNFCU and OASFCU. Thank you for putting this amazing summit together. It's I think we're batting cleanup here, and it's been just incredible content these past 2 days, and we're just so grateful to be a part of that. And as Tom mentioned, I am the President and CEO of Inclusive, and Inclusive it's a U.S. national network of credit unions devoted to promoting financial inclusion, community development, and now working specifically on resilient and sustainable solutions for low-income, underserved, and disenfranchised communities. So it is really such a great honor to have the ability to moderate this discussion, bringing innovative green products to market. I am first going to introduce this incredible lineup of panelists, and then I think we're going to take a poll question. But first, let me introduce the speakers. I am joined on this final panel today by Justin Martin from Verity Credit Union in Seattle, Washington, Parmita Zaring-Kamar from Van City in British Columbia, Canada, and folks that we all learn from quite a bit on this work. Aurelio Arroyo from Jesus Obrero Cooperativa in Puerto Rico is doing some really exciting work you'll hear some more about. Casey Suarez from OAS Federal Credit Union in DC, but of course serving the Americas, and Jill Ahrens Grutzner from Innovation Credit Union. And Jill is going to be joined by Russ Siemens, who's an Innovation Credit Union board member. And they're from Saskatchewan, Canada, and have some really great stuff to share. I think now, I just want to double check with the UNFCU team. I think we're going to take our first poll question. Is that right? I think we have it lined up. Yes, there we go. So I guess we'll get started on each of the poll questions. The first is, has COVID-19 changed your credit union's plan to introduce or launch more green products? And that's yes or no. And the second question is, if so, how far are you on your green product journey? And I think we're going to take a minute while we get those questions answered. Great. And there we see some of the results. So it's about 50-50 about whether or not COVID has had any effect on people trying to introduce or launch green products. And we're seeing quite an interesting, more than half of the audience has already launched more than one product. And I think that's going to be certainly very, very important, because we'll be hearing a lot from the folks on the panel, but do include questions as we go in the chat box, and we will be taking it. So I guess I'd first like to hand it over to Justin Martin from Verity Credit Union. And Justin, I'd love to ask you to tell a little bit of the background about your green products at Verity and how you got started, and some of the focus that you all have on transparency and tracking progress.
Thank you, Kathy. Yeah, I want to just share a little bit about our journey. We started this journey of transforming our credit union from one that offered more, what I'll call traditional products, to one that is really being seen as a leader in the green space and in offering green solutions. And one of the first things we did in this journey is said, we don't really have an effective way to measure success. And so as we started looking at how we wanted to change as a credit union, we started looking out and saying, what solutions are out there, and who are some like-minded organizations or financial institutions trying to do the same work? And we quickly came to become aware of, and afterwards become a member of the Global Alliance of Banking on Values, which I know has been talked about in this conference. And one of the things that changed us foundationally was starting to get insights into scorecards, metrics, and measurements on how we could change the mix of our loan portfolio from being one that was heavy in producing carbon to one that was becoming more effective in bringing carbon out of our atmosphere and out of our world. And so as we went through this process, what we did is we started establishing this baseline, but then establishing goals. And we set a goal in 2017 that in 3 years, 25% of all loans we make would be considered green. And we did this before we really had a green product line. And I think what was very powerful is it forced conversations, innovations, and partnerships in changing how we thought about business and how we did business. And as we started to go down this journey, what we found is we needed to shift the amount of loans we were doing in traditional portfolios, such as cars, or again, more things that are carbon output, to ones that were more green. And we introduced a solar line, and we introduced some green energy retrofit loans, and so on. And what we've seen is significant growth through that. We are now trending that by the year 2025, 40% of all our loans, and we're a $685 million institution, will be in that impact category, driven mainly by green products. Furthermore, one of the things that we're very interested in is going beyond just green products. How do we create more transparency on what the environmental impact is around our lending operations? And one of the things that the GABV has given us access to is this concept of the Platform for Carbon Accounting Financials, or PCAF. And what this does, and I'll sum it up shortly here, is it is a way to measure not just the green loans that you're introducing, but what's the carbon output of your entire loan portfolio. So for example, I live in a house that was built in 1911. That has a significant, it's not energy efficient. So that has obviously a significant impact on the amount of energy I use and the environmental impact of all that energy. This measurement and accountability measure creates transparency in the amount of our mortgage portfolio, and creates parameters around what is that output of the older home loans that we have versus maybe newer and more energy retrofit ones. And it does this across all product categories in a way that is allowing us to get more insights internally on where we need to shift our focuses to reduce the amount of output of our lending portfolio, and also report to our communities so they can get a transparent look into what we are doing as an institution to reduce our negative impact on the environment. So I'll pause right there, Kathy, in terms of just an overview of what we're doing, and turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Justin. There's so much rich work there to mine, and I know there's a lot of details folks are going to want to hear from you specifically on the products in the Q&A. I'm going to next turn to Parmita. Parmita is from Van City. And Parmita, I'd like to ask you to maybe share, we of course also want to hear a bit about the innovative green products that Van City has developed and delivers. And maybe to get your thoughts on how you all have worked to move the products that you've developed from sort of niche to more mainstream, and how you sort of engage your teams to be the advocates to do that.
Thanks, Kathy. So yes, Van City is, for those of you who are not aware, Canada's largest credit union. We've had green products for actually over a decade. They were developed by our community investment team, and they kind of are relics of a different time. They were very niche, and the uptake was quite low. This past year, though, what we found was that our membership and our board of directors have pushed us to make bigger, more public stances on climate action, on our position, and educating our members on what they can do to take steps towards lighter living and reducing their own footprint. So that informed our approach in coming together as a cross-functional team. So as I mentioned previously, there was a smaller group of climate experts that were the producers of these products. And what we've done differently this time is brought together a cross-functional group from around the organization, really bringing together bright minds from each area, marketing, product, all together to really look at the challenges we have ahead. I mean, we are signatories of GABV's 3Cs initiative, as well as the UN Principles for Responsible Banking. So as we take steps and understand how to decarbonize our portfolio, we have a lot to learn, and we have to come together to understand how to do that. So to do that, we took a couple different steps in developing what became our PlanetWise suite of solutions, which include 3 retail loans, which look at reducing financial and knowledge barriers towards retrofitting homes, purchasing zero low emission transportation options, promoting deconstruction as an alternative to demolition, since demolitions are a leading contributor to landfills in our area. And we're just about to launch a PlanetWise business solutions suite, which is looking at low interest financing to businesses to green their operations. So to move from the niche into the mainstream, the first was the design of the products themselves. weren't really designed from a UX perspective. So what we found was that the value propositions were unclear in the product marketing and in terms of enticing members to actually take steps towards lighter living. And the financing wasn't very flexible. The products were very rigid in how they were set up. So we've optimized them to create as much flexibility as we could to allow staff to take a more custom approach when looking to finance in the members' best interests. Then there was the fact that, in the past, when we launched these green products, we were doing them individually. So, just looking at retrofits or just looking at clean air loans. And what we wanted to do this time was to create greater power in branding and creating a suite of products to talk about them collectively. So in concert with more publicizing of Vancity's climate positions and our commitments and why they're important by bringing the products together to support that statement and show members how they could use those products to take steps towards climate action. There's greater power and limelight really given to the products in that way than just having one niche product. And then finally, there's the piece of making our staff champions of the products. So what we found was historically staff had very low knowledge and comfort in even being advocates for these products and didn't feel that they could be experts in this space. So part of our challenge has been to bring folks together to make them feel like they could be product champions, to increase the amount of staff training and the resource centers we've offered, and to keep the engagement going after launch, of course. Like this is going to be an ongoing story. We want to keep our staff feeling like we're moving collectively towards the right outcomes. So we've also produced a dashboard that's tracking the success of the suite. And we're making that more publicly available so that staff can track it and feel like they are part of this journey towards climate action.
That is such an important, I think it's such an important note for all product design and all products that get developed in a credit union is, not to spend all of your creative juices just on the design and the development of the product, but then really getting creative on and thoughtful about how important it is that staff understand it and own it and know it and feel comfortable talking to members about it. So kudos to you for that approach. I think that's just so really powerful. And I know there's going to be a lot of follow-up questions for you on that. And thank you. Next, I want to turn it over to Aurelio Arroyo, who is the CEO at Jesus Obrero Cooperativa in Puerto Rico. And Aurelio, I'd like to ask you to share with folks on the webinar, in the summit, some of a little bit of the background on the very unique story of Puerto Rico and solar finance and how that fits in to sort of the broader context of what you all in the Cooperativa movement are doing in Puerto Rico as you're rebuilding from so many of the crises you've had to endure.
Thank you, Kathy. Hi, everyone. I like to, when somebody invites me to explain how was our involvement in terms of green product, I like to do a chronology. In 2011, an electrical engineer from the community approached us to see if we could find a way to create solar financing specifically for photovoltaic systems, residential photovoltaic system or solar panel systems. We saw the opportunity to expand this product, and we saw opportunities to bring a needed financing product to our market. Remember that Puerto Rico it's a tropical island, and we have the raw material, the sun 365 days a year. So we have to move more over, and we know that it was a theme principles, also cooperative principles. We need to insert no matter what. We need to be responsible with our members. We need to be responsible with our communities, but also we have to look innovation and added value in the process to bring financing that our members has no chances to get in the market. So in 2013, we start our pilot plan with the first loan, and we start adjusting and fine-tuning the process in terms to create value and to understand the needs of our members, the needs of our cooperative, our credit union, and the needs of the industry also are the three important parts of the process. So in 2014, we created our first guidelines, solar loan guidelines in our cooperativa, but today is the most widely used guidelines in solar loans among cooperativas in Puerto Rico. So we create a specific product that were not exist before for our members and our community. We call it the green loan. Already we have disbursed $6 million in photovoltaic system, specifically 90% in residential project. Before 2013, only privileged people, person that has in the upper levels of incomes and big business has the ability to establish their own photovoltaic system. In 2015, we established our own photovoltaic system as part of our commitment with our members also, and to serve as a showcase to our members and to invite them to see the results of using solar energy. We insert our own photovoltaic system with 3 carports in our premises. We only have one branch, and we produce 86% of energy savings. Up to date, we have been produced $280,000 in savings for the credit union that is distributed to the benefits to our members. And in 2016, we had the only opportunity and became the first cooperativa to finance the photovoltaic system to another co-op, a gas station with a project of $550,000. It was we were the first cooperativa, an actual portfolio of over 400 solar loans all around the island. Some business project, 10% of our portfolio are some business projects, small and medium enterprises like community drugstores or doctor offices, something professional offices like that. But we have the impact in 2017. That chronology, I want to jump the 2017, but I can't. You remember that in 2017 we were struck by 2 Category 5 hurricane, Hurricane Irma and Hurricane Maria, and Hurricane Maria produced the biggest blackout in the U.S. history. Puerto Rico suffered, or the communities in Puerto Rico suffered an average of 4 months of blackout, but some community observed up to 9 months of blackout. There is no electricity in some parts of the area, and we need to move not only for fashion, not only for in terms of conservation, or the environmental conservation, not only in terms of produce savings in the electric bill. We need to. It was a matter of life, of wellness. It's a matter of produce energy because there is no other choice to produce. And we move through. We move with our members, with the needs of our community, to provide solar loan finance and solar financing to our members. Remember that Puerto Rico has a weak infrastructure in terms of energy, so we need to move in that way. It was as I mentioned before, is a principal way. We today we see the solar financing and the expansion of the solar financing project as part not only of our commitment, is part of our values as a credit union, as a cooperativa. We look more than balance sheet. We have to be responsible with the need of our people, our members, and our community. Today we have received the approach of some communities that they are not thinking alone with solar panels or to provide solar panels to the community members. They are thinking to create microgrids, community microgrids. The Department of Energy, Federal Department of Energy, in a study made in 2018, they found that Puerto Rico has the ability to create 150 community microgrids, specifically in the rural area of the island. So we are helping some communities in that process to create a product, a finance product that direct supply the need of the community. Also, I want to express a little bit of our experience. 93% of our customers or members that has solar loans are on the upper credit levels in our portfolio. It's the best performing portfolio that we have in our cooperativa. And also, there is only 2 non-performing loans, and both loans were restructured. So the members keep the system with them. We are moving forward with the process, but we want to expand it. So we are in the route to expand our process to bring green products to our members and our community.
That is great, a great story, and I so appreciate the extent to which you all are building solutions for the long term amid such turmoil and challenges, and it really does define resiliency. We have some questions coming up, but I'm going to go through and ask each of the panelists to speak, and then we'll come back to some of the great questions in the Q&A. Next up, we have Casey Suarez from OAS Federal Credit Union. And OAS is based in Washington, D.C., but as you've heard throughout the past 2 days from Carlos and others, serving staff and multiple SEGs throughout the Americas. Casey, you all have a story of sort of an incredibly diverse membership base, a very strong sort of volunteer connection from your membership base. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the journey of how you got to sort of green activities and specifically innovative green products through that kind of shared membership and volunteer engagement.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here talking with everyone. Yes, we have a very robust volunteer program. And we feel very strongly that the volunteers are the direct link with the other members, and that this is that they bring expressions of interest and concern from the members. And we do have over 50% of our members are nationals of other countries. And so we are constantly trying to be open and creative about how we engage them more than today, tomorrow, how we engage them more. We have about 30 SEGs. Kathy mentioned we have SEGs, and we have 9 committees, including the board. We consider it a very robust volunteer program. The committees all focus on different things, but they're bringing to the committee the interests of the members and get discussed. We have a very collaborative relationship with staff and management. And we see the volunteers as being persons who bring additional expertise, additional experience, and can enrich the programs that we're discussing to create. So not only do we represent the members' voice, but we also, collaborate and contribute to the ideas through our committees. We have about 60 volunteers at any given time, and they meet monthly and are very, very dynamic and suggest very good programs. Some of the ways that we've engaged and gotten to where we are today is a journey. And we started with, let's say 2007, we started with e-voting. And we saw that as a way to reach out to more members, to get them more engaged in the governance of the organization. And that each year we work on getting more and more. We get, an average of 20 to 25% of our members usually participate in our elections. And so through that, we try to build upon that each year in the programs that we do. We feel that the volunteers are bringing innovative and new ideas for the committees as a result of this engagement and more members being involved. So after the e-voting got established, we then did the route that many of you have. We went paperless. We started an awareness raising process about green, and additionally, for example, in contemplating a remodeling of our lobby, we used we got bids from green architects. So we tried to, on the staff side, if you will, on the organization side, we try to, it gets implemented in procedures like vendors. We now try to get only vendors who have a statement about the environment, climate change, or one of the SDGs. And we do, that is a serious part of our selection process. We also have a very robust, if you will, also strategic planning process. So we do the planning once every 5 years, like most everybody, but every year we meet on strategic topics. And that way we feel we're innovating and bringing new ideas, and constantly, not only through the committees that meet once a month, but also through this strategic planning retreat. We meet for a whole day. This year it'll be 3 hours by Zoom, but most of the time we meet the whole day, and it's a mix of staff and volunteers. So we really do see us working together and complementing the efforts of staff, and also contributing ideas and being part of that strategic planning and decision-making process. This year, we held our annual meeting, and now we have maybe 9,000 members, around 9,000. And this year, we were able to have, instead of the usual amount that come to the annual meeting, we do stream it, but we had almost 500 people actively attend our meeting. And we saw that as a great energizing moment for all of us. And so what we're doing now, we've already had some brainstorming sessions of volunteers with staff, and to see how we can strengthen the ties with our members that live abroad, and see if we can't get representation on committees, get them engaged in some of the projects. And over the years, we have collaborated with some of our SEGs in terms of their projects. So we've helped build schools, we've helped with health initiatives in areas of poverty. And so we in our countries. So that's something, it's an ongoing activity that we have. And just kind of summarizing, because I know we have others, but we feel that it's a good investment to have your members more engaged in a collaborative way, and bringing new ideas, because our committees, all 9 of them, have people from a variety of backgrounds and professions. And this, we feel, really only enriches what we're doing as a credit union. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey, and kudos to you for that incredible deep work you're doing with the membership and engaging members as volunteers in this journey. I'm next going to kick it over to Jill and Russ. And Jill and Russ are with Innovation Credit Union in Saskatchewan, Canada. And Jill and Russ come from, and Innovation comes from, it's a credit union that's located in coal country. And I wonder if you all could share with us a little bit about kind of the process that you all went through as you were developing your proposals around your green line of banking, and sort of how that went, how you did it, and a little bit about the dynamics of moving forward with a really robust initiative around going green and supporting the environment and encouraging your members and your community to embrace green banking and green products, while you're also in the midst of an economy that might feel threatened by that.
Go ahead, Jill.
Well, actually, Russ, I was kind of hoping that maybe you would start off as the director, give the direction for the company, and I can take it to operations then.
Sure, that would be terrific. Well, thank you so much. It's terrific. And I really appreciate, Casey, what you just talked about in terms of the involvement of the membership. And so I thank you for involving board of directors on this in this summit. And thanks for that, because I think the key is connection between strategy and operations. And as board members, we often are hesitant to get involved in operations, and that might create a divide between the two. And I really think it's important that operations and products and delivery and services are aligned with the board strategy. And so before I turn it to Jill, I'd just like to maybe mention a few ways that our board sees connecting with strategy and linking that into our operations and our product delivery. And I think that, you know, if you're a CEO or if you're a management person, it's critical that that whatever you're doing is tied to the strategy of the board. It will potentially derail if that linkage isn't there, and you may find yourself out on your own, and you may find yourself even in worse situations. So the first way that I would suggest that we link our strategy with our operations, and some other panelists or other keynotes have talked about it, and it's related to education and learning. That is so important. And so just for board members even to be part of this summit, I would encourage us to build that opportunity for in the future for more board members to be part of the summit and learn from opportunities like this summit. Just recently, a number of our credit unions got together. As was mentioned, we're in the energy sector here. It's oil and gas in right where we live. Coal is near us too. But oil and gas right here. And so we brought in one of the sustainability experts from Husky Energy, and she talked to us about what they're trying to do, or what she's trying to do in their organization and their company to build sustainability. Interestingly, on the day that she was presenting to us, Cenovus Energy announced a takeover of Husky Energy. And so she was talking to us, and at the same time, she knew that her job was completely changing. And so there's something there's real time change that's taking place. I know it's happening, you know, in those companies that I talked about. It's happening in the investment world. It's happening in insurances. This is real time. This stuff is real. And so we, as a group of credit unions, got together and we had a webinar, and we invited experts from the industry into that webinar. Attendance at this kind of a summit, and there's attended the UNEP FI Roundtable recently, and I'll be attending future summits. And I just encourage us to encourage our board members to be involved. So one way is through education and learning. The second strategy that we use to link strategy with operations is to get sustainability on the board agenda, and to have a board champion. So Jill and I work as a tag team. I being on the board, Jill working in management. And so we tag team this, and so the report of this will go to the board agenda. And so I asked our board chair, I needed to be on the agenda to present on the summit learning, and so I'm on that agenda next week. So just one way to do that is to get onto the board agenda. But there are also other ways to get on the board agenda rather than reporting on summits. Things like CEO compensation. Do we have a direct link to CEO compensation and sustainability? That gets it on the agenda. Community giving, somebody mentioned it earlier. Do we have a link between community giving and sustainability? That gets sustainability on the board agenda. Member advisory forums, Casey, that's what you were talking about, that idea of those member advisory panels coming in, or AGMs, like you mentioned, bringing somebody in to speak on sustainability, all important. And then lastly, in terms of the agenda, it's the meeting with the regulators. We have, boards have a special relationship with regulators, and it's different than that of management. And so if we, at those meetings that we have with the regulators, can involve a conversation around sustainability, I think that could be very powerful. And then just lastly, linking to other strategic initiatives. Our board is involved in something called the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion. And I'll post that link they have some great resources for companies and for credit unions. And so we're involved in that, and that has a linkage to sustainability. We're also involved in the Truth and Reconciliation call to action in Canada, and we signed on to that. That was a significant discussion for our board to sign on to the Truth and Reconciliation call to action, but it helped us as we later signed on to the responsible banking signatory. I think the discussions that we had in the Truth and Reconciliation helped us. And so those things would all be ways that we can link our strategy with our operations. And with that, then I'll turn it to you, Jill.
Thanks, Russ. I know we're pretty much at time here, so I will try to make this brief. It's very important for management to have the support of the board, like Russ talked about. That's why I felt it was very important for him to speak from the board perspective. As far as from the leadership perspective, it is a mandate that we have to have responsible banking and actions in place. And so we did have a plan to launch some green products in 2020. Unfortunately, COVID got in the way, and so that has been turned to 2021. And we do have the oil and gas in our area, and they have been our members for years and years and years. So when we do finally launch, we'll have to make sure that we do it in a way that we're not alienating them, but we're looking at an opportunity for other members. And with that, I'll toss it back to you guys.
Wow, it's fascinating. And I just keep reflecting on, as all of you have been speaking, the extent to which you've gone really deep. And I think that just kept coming through is that the extent to which there's been really deep reflection and engagement and building of knowledge and awareness all throughout the institution, from the members to the boards and volunteers and throughout the staff. So it's just really, really fabulous. Tom, I know we are hitting up on time, but do we have a couple minutes that we can ask a couple questions to the panelists?
Yeah, but go ahead. I think that's fine. Maybe one or two questions we can.
One or two questions. I did see in the chat there was a very specific question for Aurelio about the solar panels as collateral and how your regulator kind of views that, and does that pose any challenges around using collateral, doing secured loans with the panels themselves as collateral? So maybe you don't mind answering that, and then maybe I have one global question for the whole group.
Okay, yes, we use as collateral the equipment, all the equipment related to the photovoltaic system. And also we use our underwriting lines, take consideration of the ability of the applicant or the member. And we use the same guidelines as personal loans or other products. Also, our regulator they're asking for, in our call reports, or quarterly call reports, are asking for a specific statistic about solar loans among all the credit union in Puerto Rico. I consider that something like $50 to $60 million are placed throughout solar loans in cooperativas in Puerto Rico right now. But they have no problem. They have no problem with our loans up to now. Never know when regulators are involved. You never know.
And maybe for the time being, maybe we'll have COSEC be a kind of spread the word to the other regulators. I certainly think NCUA could benefit from having some cross-pollination on accepting that as well. I have one final kind of parting question that I open to the whole panel. All throughout, I'm also struck by how much sort of local context to the credit union kind of is a factor. And so I just wanted to see if anyone had thoughts on sort of local policy context that helped, aided, or has inhibited your ability to deliver on green products and getting good, innovative green products to marketplace. Does anybody have thoughts about the kind of the policy environment and sort of what we should be also thinking about in terms of shaping that?
Well, maybe I'll just offer, so from Innovation Credit Union, and when I was attending the UNEP FI roundtable, I was struck by a concept called radical prudence. I hadn't heard it before. Maybe some of you are familiar, but it was the idea that you just divest of everything, and then that's the solution. And Mark Carney and others were saying that's actually not the solution. The solution is to work through transition and to help those that are transitioning, because the transition is real. There is a transition that's happening. So I think that was helpful for us to eliminate that idea of radical prudence. That's not effective, but rather let's work with the members on their transition, and I think that will be helpful for us.
Yeah. I'd like to just add that I think that it is a very good question, because the regulators in our case are very aware that we have membership over 50% in other countries. And so sometimes they really micro look at everything we're doing. And so the policies that we develop, and I think we are very innovative. The staff is marvelous, and the volunteers also contribute, but we do a lot of due diligence to make sure that what we finalize will be okay in a variety of arenas, including the regulatory arena. But we also want to be sensitive to how does this work in Uruguay, or how does this work in Costa Rica, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we do, it hasn't inhibited us, the policy environment, but I think we are very careful and we do the due diligence.
And I would just piggyback on these in two ways. First off, in terms of working with our regulators, one of the things that we found is the more that we're partnering with them ahead of time on some of the things that we're trying to do to shift our credit union, the more comfortable they are with it. I'll use solar lending. We just expanded outside of our state, so now we're doing it throughout the country, multi-state. And one of the things when we sat down with the regulators in our state was getting them really comfortable with historical delinquencies, things to that, and really walking them through how this is a safer way to shift our portfolio. And at the end of it, they were very enthusiastic about that move. So I think the more that you can proactively reach out and speak to them and get their insights, and I don't want to say a partnership, but at least get them connected so that they're not asking you, you're telling them, I think is a really powerful spot. The second thing in terms of public policy, I really encourage, and I'm sure we all do it, but the more that we can get in front of our legislators and talk about what are the issues that they're seeing, I think is really a spark for innovation in general, especially in the green space. And what we've seen in Seattle is a lot of our legislators are really concerned with issues of affordable housing. And as we start to layer in, if we're moving this way and trying to create more of this affordable housing, how do we make those green housing how do we make sure that we're being purposeful and thinking how that's working together? And that's created a lot of partnerships where we've been put in touch with other companies that are trying to work on these issues. And we've been able to merge some of our efforts together to really scale them up and make a bigger impact. So I think the more that we're proactively in these conversations, talking to people about what we're trying to do, the more innovation comes from that and opportunities as well.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback off of what Justin's saying here to say, at least in our area, in our province, our government is looking at a number of issues that hasn't quite solidified. I think that's why it is so important to be working closely with them, but on topics like how to support the retrofit journey, because emissions are the leading cause, or emissions from buildings are the leading cause of emissions in our area. And they're also looking at things like strata insurance. I don't know if anyone else has had this issue in other areas, but in BC, strata insurance is up over 400%. And we are struggling with this as a credit union as well, and trying to understand really climate risk to our lending portfolio and our mortgage portfolio, but also, yeah, I think working as closely as possible with those regulators, with government, to try to create policies that are moving us in the right direction and where we can work hand in hand together, will all benefit.
Fabulous.
Well, thank you.
Sorry, Tom. Just wanted to say thank you to the panelists and turn it back to you.
No, thank you. First of all, thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Jill, Casey, Justin, Aurelio, Russ, Permuta. First of all, everything you guys were talking about, I could have asked 20 questions in there. I mean, I hope we can continue this conversation. I know we're going to have, because so much what you were talking about this kind of marketing and training and talking to the regulators and making a member connection and connecting to these best practice groups. So much of this is what we're kind of thinking about when we think about United in Sustainability, but what our next step could be, so that we're not talking to regulators one-off, right? We're not, that the other organizations that are in the credit union space, I don't know if they're talking about these things. I know a lot of times when we look at their regulatory initiative, they don't look that different than like what you might see in a banking regulatory group, right? And we're like, that's what, how do we differentiate in credit unions to bring these kinds of make sustainability kind of a differentiator, introducing to our members, make them think of credit unions first when it comes to green products, right? How do we connect to that? I hope people who want to come to that next extra session we have on where UIS goes next, I hope you all stay for that, because it's kind of that's what we're interested in, figuring out how we can actually penetrate into and be a kind of a useful voice in that conversation. But with that, thank you all for that. And I want to conclude with a few closing thoughts for the kind of main session with Prasad Surapaneni, our co-executive sponsor of UNFCU's GSP and SVP of Information, Chief Information Officer at UNFCU. Thanks, Prasad. Go ahead.
Thanks, Tom. Wow, what an incredible summit this has been. Like most of you, I dread virtual meetings, but with engaging content and active participation, time just flew. We were a little disappointed we couldn't have this in person, but the silver lining is many more of us are able to participate in this summit. It's great to spend time and exchange ideas with like-minded people over 2 days. I couldn't be happier walking away from this summit knowing that we are united in sustainability. If you had asked me 10 years ago what comes to my mind when you ask about sustainability, it is climate change. But sustainability is more than that. It is also about social justice, equality, making this earth equitable for everyone, all life. United Nations is leading the way and set sustainable development goals to be achieved by 2030. Yesterday, Maura May presented SDG Action Manager tool that UN Global Compact and B Labs created. We can use it to confidentially self-assess our organizations and start our journey. Most importantly, it is free to use. It gives you a baseline. Please take advantage of this resource. We had great sessions on DEI and staff engagement with Taylor and Carlene. Taylor underscored DEI is more than hiring few people and gave us a roadmap from Filene for approaching DEI in our organizations. You can start your DEI journey with this if you're wondering where to start. We heard from Layli yesterday about UNEP's Principles of Responsible Banking. Again, a great resource or source for us to guide our organization. We learned a lot more from our many panelists. This morning, Kimberly talked about the value of linking strategy to sustainability, measuring and reporting. If you're looking to accelerate your sustainability journey, Kimberly is a great resource. Please leverage her. What an incredible feast it was for eyes and mind from Annie Griffiths this morning. Story she's able to relay about women around the world with just pictures. I want to thank Carlos Calderon and UIS FCU for co-hosting this summit. I want to congratulate Tom and the entire UIS organizing committee for the incredible job they did. Finally, in the panel yesterday, what Susan from National Geographic said resonated with me. No one in any organization can solve these problems by themselves. No one organization can solve the problems either. But collectively, we can solve these problems by exchanging ideas, sharing best practices, learning from each other's mistakes. We are united in sustainability. Thank you. But before we leave Zoom, you have another opportunity to help grow our movement. Tom Kurian will conduct a focus group right now on shaping the United in Sustainability Network. Our vision for UIS, your thoughts and ideas on our industry leadership. We want to continue these important discussions on sustainability and obtain your feedback. We hope that many of you can join Tom and UNFCU GSP colleagues, Patrick Seiler and Liz Philippe, as well as Carlos Calderon for a 30-minute brainstorm. Additionally, the UIS network will also host a Zoom meeting early in the new year. Look for more information about this event in the weeks ahead. Until then, be well, everyone. Thank you again for your participation. Tom, back to you for the bonus session.
Thank you, Prasad. And that ends the official part of the summit. I do hope that all of you do stay on for this extra session. We really do want your feedback on where we go from here. So with that, we'll close the official session and we'll stop the recording. I hope you can stay on and we'll transition over into the actual bonus session.